Our mission was to take a look at all the vessels coming in and out of Haiphong Harbor in North Vietnam, take pictures of them. So that was my primary mission. Secondarily, it was to hunt submarines.
This podcast is certified fresh. freshmediaworks.com.
Welcome to Lunch with Chris. We're your host, Chris Daly, brings you uplifting interviews with extraordinary individuals making a positive impact. Join as he introduces remarkable people who have left their mark on their respective fields.
As you heard, my next guest is a former naval aviator, but he spends his time now figuring out how the body works at a chemical level. I will introduce you to Red O'Loughlin right after this. Have you ever thought about doing your own podcast? It is the absolute best way to grow your brand, spread your message, and build your following. Fresh Media Works can help. We do all the heavy lifting, and you just focus on your message. To find out how easy we can make launching your new podcast, call 713-269-4620 or check us out at freshmediaworks.com. All right, everybody join me in welcoming Red O'Loughlin to the show. Red, how are you today?
Exceptionally well, as always.
I love that. And I love that about you. You're another person who has a great positive attitude all the time, and there's not enough of us in the world.
You know, my mentor many years ago, 10 years ago, used to say, excellent as always. And in the process of being around him, I started to say that. And it didn't dawn on me until it took me about 30 days before it became natural. I felt it. But there are literally maybe 1-2 days a year when you're just not 100%. And I would ask me, and I say, excellent as always. And all of a sudden I could literally feel not a spark, but some current go through my body, literally. And within 5 minutes, I was changed. And I said, whoa. And then all of a sudden it happened again several months after that. And it's interesting that when you start hearing yourself talk, you almost believe what you're saying. But in that particular case, it actually happened. And it does make you feel a lot better, even though you may not have 100%. Excellent, as always. And it's amazing how that actually does change you a little bit.
Amen, amen. I've heard that your brain can't tell the difference between, something that's really happening or something you just believed, vehemently inside you. So I always keep it positive.
Yeah, your subconscious mind cannot tell the difference between real and imagined. That is true.
Right on. So if I were to describe you, you're a man of many talents and many hats. Would I say Red O'Loughlin with MRO Global, or would I say as an author, a speaker, a publisher? How would I describe you?
Nowadays, I'm a researcher. That's probably what I really and truly have my full passion into. And I research the human body at the cellular level, chemically speaking. My first love was chemistry, long before I ever met my wife, which will be 56 years this year. And I just love getting involved at the chemical end of things. And so when I look for something, what causes this to happen? Well, okay, what causes that to happen? Can I slow it down? Can I speed it up? And that's what I research. That's what I write about. That's what I speak about. And most of it's on health and wellness, and it focuses a lot on longevity. So for part of my world right now, I'm a writer, author, speaker on health and wellness. That's what I research. The other part is I help other people through my publishing, through my speaking, through my TV shows that I do. And then when I'm not doing that, I'm just having fun. My fun involves cooking, baking, gardening, reading, a lot of reading, and those things that just kind of keep me happy.
I love that. I love that. Let's back up. Where did you grow up?
My dad was in the military. I'm the oldest of 9 kids. And my mom had an interesting hobby. Everywhere my dad was stationed, she had a kid. So there's 2 Virginians, 2 Californians, 2 Panamanians, 2 Puerto Ricans, and 2 Texans and a Puerto Rican. And so I grew up all across the United States wherever my dad happened to be at. The 2 outside places were Panama twice and Puerto Rico once. So I kind of grew up. But when people ask me that, where are you from, I usually say Corpus Christi, because that's when I went into junior high, high school, and that's where my dad retired from the military. So I consider Texas my home. I consider South Texas that's my roots. It's where I went to college. Once I graduated from college, I got an invitation to Vietnam, and the rest is history. 61 countries later, 31 years in the military, and here I am today, pretending like I know what I'm doing.
Well, you're doing a good job. So, I met you in Houston, and probably 10 years ago, and my question is the nickname Red. I assume that's not a given name.
No, my real name is Francis Michael III. My dad was called Red. He had red hair. I had red hair. So I was baby red for a while, and then little red, then other redhead. 8 out of 11 in my family are redhead. So you have, daddy red, you had big red, you had little red. You had all different reds. So somebody would call on the phone and say, "Is Red there?" Well, which one? Okay, which one? And it's interesting because my son is named Red. He's the fourth, but he doesn't have red hair. And his voice and my voice were almost same in high school. I could answer the phone and be talking to one of his girlfriends, and they wouldn't know for a long time that, until you finally figure out, okay, is this somebody I should be talking to or not? Anyway,
right.
So it's interesting, but Red has stuck. And interestingly enough, my daughter was born with no hair, came in white, and over time it became kind of a dirty dishwater blonde through high school. I get a call one day. She's in college. She says, "Dad, you always wanted a redhead, didn't you?" I said, "Yeah." And she says, "Well, my hair changed." I said, "What do you mean?" Just literally in the last year, it has changed. I am now a strawberry blonde. It's a natural change over time. So, from no hair, bald, to white hair, to blonde hair, to strawberry blonde. So, things change.
Yeah, definitely. So I also want to dig into your Navy background. My son is currently serving in the Navy, and so I'm always fascinated to hear the stories. So give me some Navy stories.
Okay, my dad was a pilot, flew, 88 different kinds of aircraft, World War II, seaplanes, jets, all that kind of stuff. So when Vietnam was happening, I had a choice of being able to go in ahead of time on my own terms or not. He suggested that I go patrol, and the main reason being is it doesn't land on carriers. It always has a landing at someplace in the world on ground every night. So that was the area I went in. I ended up with over 4,200 hours, and we were basically submarine hunters. And so that was my primary mission for about 16 years out of my 31 years in the military as an aviator. I tell a story that popped up way back when there was a movie done, a video training tape called Sex and the Naval Aviator, Part 2. And one of the things they talked about was the fact that in the Navy aviation community, the only thing that's really truly strange is the fact that it draws in the oldest born male of the family into the aviation field. That's not true in the Air Force or others. And yet the more important one is you find the oldest born male married to the oldest born female in the family. My wife is the middle of 7, but the oldest girl. And when I start looking at all my friends, I know 30, 40, 50 officers there in the squadron, they're married. They're the oldest born males married to the oldest born female in 95% of the cases. So from an unusual perspective that you just don't see in Navy stories, that's kind of really strange, but that's what it is. My dad was the oldest born male married to the oldest born female. So that is kind of the uniqueness there. But in the course of Vietnam, I was flying out of the Philippines, out of Thailand, out of Vietnam on what they call a yellow brick road. And we would take off, be in the air, generally at about 200 feet, and we'd be there all day long until it got dark. And then come back and land. And our mission was to take a look at all the vessels coming in and out of Haiphong Harbor in North Vietnam. Take pictures of them, locate them. Anyway, so that was my primary mission. Secondarily, it was to hunt submarines. Tertiary, it was to just do surface surveillance. Periodically, we would fly over tropical islands looking for sunken boats or SOSs or things like that. But from an aviation perspective, they generally keep the younger people in that realm. So at about 15, 16 years aviation, I'm senior enough that now all of a sudden I start shifting over and I'm ending up on staffs here, there, and yonder. So I ended up doing 4.5 years on active duty during Vietnam. got out, went in the reserves for 20 years, and then I went back on active duty for 6 years. I spent 2 years in New York City, 2 years in the Bay Area, California, my last 2 years in Germany. And I was senior deputy director for reserve affairs. My boss was a 2-star, and he showed up 2 or 3 days a week. And other than that, I was there running the show for about 5,500 reservists through 89 countries in Europe and Africa. And that was my job, was oversight of the reservists in Europe and Africa. And so that was during Bosnia, during Kosovo, during those kinds of operations. And so we were there to help them as much as we could. Had a lot of interesting stories with, different other countries as they're trying to expand their reserve forces and things. But all in all, from active duty involvement with Russian combatants as you're flying by them to Russian submarines. I've had a lot of experience on them trying to find them, actually found them, to working with different staffs, Canadian, Australian, it doesn't matter, all over the world. Just a lot of different kinds of experiences in my career.
Well, and so, the first thing that popped into my head was, how do you find a sub from an airplane?
Well, I was very fortunate because when I go in there for the briefings, you take a look at, first thing I look at is what is the track of the submarine that's already been there. In some cases, you actually say, well, he was up here in the Iceland area and he's down over here off of Azores. And anyway, so you look at his general trend, you know where he's going, whether it's in the Atlantic or the Pacific or you know generally where they're going. So you have a track. I take a look at the underwater mountain ranges. What are the areas that he would probably want to avoid or use for marking his navigation? And then we get the briefing saying, I want you to go out here, lay this particular pattern, and then, if you don't find anything in 3 hours, do anything you want. And we ended up finding that was probably the most beneficial thing. We put our pattern in, monitor it. If we found them, we prosecute. But you put buoys in the water, and the buoys measure sound. And so if the submarine's out there and the water is deep enough, you can pick them up you can pick them up either by what they call direct path. The noise is so loud that the sound buoy can actually hear him a mile or two away. Or sometimes the sound goes down and bounces off the bottom and comes back up again, and maybe you're 8, 10, 12, 15 miles away. And it's called bottom bounce. But if the water is really deep, the sound goes all the way down in the ocean until it can't go any further. It bends because of the density of the water, and it comes back up and hits the surface. And it hits the surface and bounces back down again, and they have what they call convergence zones. So at about every 30 or so miles, you have a little width of about 2 or 3 miles that this convergence zone sounds almost exactly like he's right there next to you, but he could be 150 miles away. And so you have the transition that happened in about 1972, where we went from sound buoys that could listen and hear everything. It's like closing your eyes and where's the sound coming from? Well, I'm not sure exactly. To opening your eyes and you can actually see the producer of the sound. And so you have a sound buoy that points in a direction. So you get another sound buoy, put it 10 miles away, and it's pointing in a direction. So now you have 2 arrows that are pointing and showing exactly where that sound comes from. So now you can go over to where those 2 arrows cross and put a sonobuoy in and say, is that him? And that's kind of how you do it in a real quick and dirty. That's how we find them. But we don't tell them that we're there. We just put some more buoys in and we track them for a while. And I think 17 out of 18 of the missions I flew, we were able to go from absolutely no contact whatsoever, didn't know where he was for at least 24 hours or more, and found him, tracked him. And in my particular crew, we would always lock all the racks in the bomb bay with whatever weapons the bomb bay was configured for. And so as we were going down, passing by the guy, open bomb bay doors, pickle number 1, torpedo or whatever it may happen to be. And so we were actually practicing as if we had real live weapons on board, going through all the steps on the checklist. And if that reacted in a kill, then that's so be it. But, torpedoes only run for so long, and the submarines know that. If they can outrun it, you have to be ready to pounce on that guy again. So, but on a mission that I'd find somebody, we would simulate dropping 10, 12 or more torpedoes, even though we didn't have that many in the aircraft. But it was just part of the training at that time that, there's a contact, the course, the speed, the depth, and you just do your thing.
Nice. And I know I'm not going to stay on military the whole time, I promise, but Tell me a story, one of the hairiest situations you found yourself in during all of that.
Well, two, maybe one, Harry. You hear people, what's the longest flight you've ever been on? And P3s can stay up for a long, long time. I've been 13 hours on more than once. But I asked the question, what's the shortest flight you've ever been on? We had an engine fire just before you rotated the aircraft and take off. So my shortest flight is 0.1 hours because we took off and came right back around and landed. And so that's kind of unusual. I mean, I've had fires in the aircraft that we had to put out. That's kind of hairy. But I think one of the most unusual ones that I tell is the fact that when we were over standing mission, wherever we happen to be at, you have what's called the ready alert. And that means that you have to be ready in the air in 30 minutes, an hour, whatever your parameters are. Mm-hmm. When I was in Hawaii, it was an hour. When I was in Vietnam, it's 30 minutes. And so if something comes up, boom, they want you in the air right now. And we were flying a mission one day off of Cameron Bay, and the radar went out. And we managed to keep it up by the rear radar worked. The front radar always got overheated. So we would turn the aircraft around, plot our plot, turn the aircraft back around again, and then go investigate those. And that's how we managed to make that whole thing. We wrote up the incident on the maintenance report. And, of course, the next morning, we're standing the ready alert. The aircraft is out there. That's our primary backup. They report radar went down. They've only been 30 minutes into their mission. And we know we are sitting there just shaking our heads. Our aircraft's ready to go. We're ready to get off the aircraft, go in and spend the day just waiting for somebody to call us. Well, unbeknownst to everybody in the world over there in Vietnam, we decided to launch ourselves just out of the blue. So we taxi out to the end of the runway. We take off, and we're in the air about 5 or 6, 7 minutes, and we get a call from maintenance control saying, launch the ready. And we said, yeah, launched about 5 minutes ago. And so we have a negative 5 or 6 minute negative response time on a ready alert launch, which is probably unheard of because nobody does that.
Yeah.
So it's not a hairy mission, but it's an interesting mission from the perspective of probably nobody else has ever done that.
Right. So now let's talk about the transition from your military career to the business world. What kind of transition was that?
Well, my primary transition was to be a chemist. That was what I got my degree in, but didn't get a chance to practice it. And so 4.5 years after getting in the military, I'm getting out. Vietnam's winding down, and I started interviewing around, and I ended up working for a company that is I was working as a quality control engineer. I started getting involved with statistics and other things. I actually a couple of years after I got in that job, I taught statistics for about 3 years at the college level. But I got heavily involved in engineering, statistical analysis, reliability analysis, failure analysis. And so my career became a quality assurance end of things. And so I ended up in, this company in manufacturing and quality assurance, this company and that one. And I ended up eventually in the oil and gas, but primarily in either quality engineering, reliability engineering, logistics engineering. My last probably major job prior to retiring, I was the head logistics guy for the Strategic Petroleum Reserve in New Orleans. And we had about 8 or 9 different locations where oil was stored. And in the event that, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve has to pump oil to somebody, well, that's the mission that we had there. Other places we were actually manufacturing things. So my background is primarily in engineering, but with a focus on failure analysis, failure prevention.
Nice. And what about, I guess, the next step being from going from an employee at some place to being in charge of your own self as an author, speaker, publisher, scientist?
That was probably one of the hardest transitions I've ever made in my life, because when you're working for somebody, they always tell you, go do this. We want you to, here's the training. And all the training I've ever had has always been for the betterment of the company. Then all of a sudden I'm working in a MLM business with my wife. We get invited to a weekend training session. And all of a sudden I find, hey, I can take training to help me become a better me. And that started about a month later in Dallas, Texas. There was an event going on up there. And at that particular one, I got bit by the MLM bug or whatever you want to call it. And I read literally a book a week for 3.5 years on some aspect of running your own business, motivation, marketing, whatever it may happen to be, on how can I take my business and make it better? What do I need to learn to make myself a better person for this? And so in the process of reading, going to a lot of classes, I hired a mentor, and I was going around the country with him. I was speaking on stage. I would have my product to sell at the back of the room. And so I transitioned abruptly, kicking and screaming, into an area that I didn't understand, that it was very foreign to me, very scary to me. But in the process of having people and books and videos that I can learn from, the journey became a little easier. I could see things differently. I could accept risk a little bit better than I could before, but it wasn't an overnight success. It was one of the things that took, okay, I got to make enough mistakes. That didn't work. And I was able to transition into something that I could be successful in, and I could speak to groups of people and say, this worked for me. This is what I did that didn't work, and provide basically some of that payback that I had gotten earlier from other people. I can now give back now in my own. So I can, in the health and wellness, those are things that I share. I mean, you ask me the time, I'll build you a watch.
I love that. And you mentioned health and wellness. That was my next question. I have no, I guess, formal education in health and wellness, but it's been a fascination of mine ever since I got my exercise physiology degree. Talk about when that became important to you and how you got started in that.
Well, the first MLM business I was in, it was focused on health and wellness. It was a product that you could drink and actually, improve your health. But it wasn't until my wife's breast cancer came about 2013, 2014, that now I had the responsibility of being a caregiver for my wife. And I'm finding in the different groups I'm belonging to, talking to nurses, that there's a lot of stuff out there. And when I said, it's been 40 years since I was a chemist, let me see what I can find out. So that's when I started my research of the human body. What is this drug doing? Are there natural options and remedies out there that could do the same thing? And so I took my collegiate learning, my academic world, and started applying it to, okay, what happens when you do this? And as I'm learning, okay, why do I have to have a pill for that when this other thing will work? So I started looking at what are the actual things that happen. What can you do to delay them, to speed them up? And so my focus was my wife, which we got her through chemo and radiation. And in that time, there was just those couple, 3 or 4 weeks between chemo and radiation, I had read a book called The Walls Protocol by Dr. Terry Wall. She's an internist. And on the day 1 of radiation, I put my wife on that protocol, only the diet. And within 48 hours, the main problem she suffered through months of chemo was fatigue. All the other side effects from the drugs I could kind of address reasonably well, but fatigue, no. Could not, just impossible. She'd take 2 or 3 2-hour naps a day, didn't want to eat, didn't want to do anything. I put her on the Walls Protocol dietary portion. There's 4 parts of it with the diet. And 48 hours later, fatigue was gone, literally gone, 72 hours gone. A week later, she's volunteering back up at the church. The last day of radiation, and they expected her fatigue to get worse through all the radiation, weeks of it. We rented a car in Houston and drove to Jacksonville, Florida. 48 hours over there, 1,000 miles. I rent a U-Haul. She follows me 48 hours after her last radiation treatment by herself, 500 miles a day in a car, no problems. And that was when that woke my eyes up to how nutrition affects the body in such a way to cancel months of chemo and radiation fog and to change your life literally overnight. So that was probably the biggest eye-opener for me as a chemist, as a health and wellness practitioner, or whatever you want to call it. And so that dietary thing, and basically it's your body needs about 30-some-odd nutrients on a daily basis. If it gets them, you can fight almost anything. But when it doesn't get them, that's when you start having the fatigue, brain fog, lethargy, all sorts of other things. In fact, you take something simple like vitamin B12 deficiency mimics Alzheimer's. That's why a lot of gerontologists will give you a B12 shot to see if that's part of the problem. But that's what I found, and once I saw that, then that's where my research went. And so that was probably the crowning aha moment in my health and wellness world.
Nice. And let me ask you this, because I recently had Dr. Thomas Siegfried on one of my shows, and he's a biologist, but he stands by his premise that you can starve cancer just with diet. And I've had other people on the show who say no, that's not real. So what is your take on something like that?
Well, there's a thing called standard of care in the United States, and the standard of care says this is the way we treat things. If you treat cancer as a genetic disorder, 4% success rate on pancreatic cancer after 5 years or whatever. But if you treat it as a metabolic disorder, and the metabolic disorders, you're treating it as if it was a nutritional issue, you have about a 96% success rate, success meaning living, not dying, at 5 years from stage 4 metabolic pancreatic cancer. But you can't get that in the United States. You got to go to CAIO or Tangiers, but other places in the world. Trying to think of Istanbul is probably the big one. But if I look at it, cancer cells grow in 2 or 3 main ways. Number one, they want sugar. If you cut sugar out, you're stopping that particular food source from getting to the cell to grow. Well, there's also another amino acid that our body makes that's almost impossible not to feed the cells. So you have some cancers that will love this particular amino acid, others that will love the sugar, and I cut the sugar out. Okay, I might be able to be very effective with the cancer on that one. But if it's a cancer that will grow with both of them, I cut the sugar out, I still have the other food source. So I have to do something that will shut down the ability of that particular one. And there are some drugs that will do that. It will actually shut down the body's production of that particular amino acid. Or you take a look at it from the front end. What's the precursor? Well, you got a simple molecule called berberine. And berberine can act very effectively as a precursor to this amino acid and stop it. And so, there are some, I believe, nutritional dietary aspects of that. But then you also have the aspect of they want their own blood supply. They want their own oxygen. They want their own, and that's angiogenesis. I have a particular heart issue where my left descending anterior artery got clogged. It's about 95% deadly. And what my heart did was it grew 2 brand new vessels, one across the front, one across the back, down to the blockage. And so I have no need for stents, as a DIY double bypass. So the body actually grew 2 brand new blood vessels. Now, but this happens all the time in the brain, and you can actually stop, strokes with that same concept because of the way the brain blood vessel system is structured, and you need just a little bit of a certain kind of vitamin E. But I believe, you look at it from a mitochondrial level in the cell, you treat it as a mitochondrial or as a metabolic disease. I think you have a whole different approach to it, a whole lot less expensive, a whole lot less disruptive in life, and a whole lot more effective. And that to me is what I believe.
Excellent. And you piqued my curiosity when you mentioned strokes, because stroke does run in my family. What is you said it's a certain vitamin that you take and that encourages that type of growth?
No, what happens is your vitamin E is an echo, has 8 different molecules. 4 of them are what they call tocotrienols and 4 tocopherols. One of the tocotrienols, I believe it's alpha tocotrienol. If you have literally a microgram or 2 in the brain, it will activate this audiogenetic sequence that if blood is stopped, it's blocked in a certain area, it will open up blood vessels around that blockage so that you actually suffer no side effects from a stroke. Very few, if any, depending on how massive and how quickly. But most of us don't have, we have it available to us, we just don't know about it. But there's no food that has all 8 of them in there, but you can buy a supplement that's called mixed tocopherols, mixed tocotrienols, and that does provide you with I think, a very good insurance policy against stroke side effects. You know, the person with the stroke who can't walk properly because half his body is still semi-paralyzed, or they can't speak or whatever. So I think if you may have that option, but if you take the right kind of nutrient, for lack of a better word, I think you have an insurance policy that provides you, oh, if that happens, this is going to take care of me. And I know some people have had 10, 12 strokes, and 2 months later, they're functional again, just like anybody else. So it's a thing that's there. But again, if you ask people about it, they don't know, because that's not what they study. They study what's the standard of care. They don't study the nutritional aspects of things.
Wow. And so tell me, with all this research, all this interest in health, what has that evolved into for you as far as your offerings to the world?
Well, I speak, and that's something that I can do nowadays easily with Zoom. It used to be you had to be somewhere, and I've done that around the country a lot. But nowadays with Zoom, during COVID, I was doing a little bit of it. Nowadays, I do that literally on a weekly basis. But so I have speaking opportunities. My books are available. I have one book that I published less than a year ago on Alzheimer's. I wrote over 40 articles during COVID on the causes of Alzheimer's. It was just because you tackle the primary one, boom, I got that one under control. There's 4 or 5 or 6 other ways that disease can progress. So you have to look at you have to look at all the causes. And it's ironic that when we look at disease in the body, it usually starts out at the cellular level as chronic low-level inflammation. And if untreated with the proper kinds of antioxidants and things, it grows into a problem at the genetic level in your DNA. Now you start having oxidative stress issues, mutations begin to form, and over the years, it doesn't happen overnight, but over years, you start to have, a kidney disease, heart issues, brain issues, whatever it may happen to be. 99%, 95% of all disease starts as chronic low-level inflammation in the body at the cellular level. So if you can control your body's cellular inflammation, and I have a book that I wrote on that. I talk about the primary causes being stress, toxins, radiation, inflammation, and diet, and even expectations. You probably heard people tell you, well, my grandfather died at 51 of a heart attack. My dad passed away at 50 of a heart disease. I don't plan on living past 50. They've already pre-programmed their brain because that's what their family history was. And family history is very important, but it's only about 5% effective because you have options you can take to turn on or off genetic causes of issues.
I love that. And if somebody wanted to read your books, find out about you, invite you to be a speaker, what's the best way to reach you?
Well, the best way for me is on the phone or by email. My website, redolaflin.com, has my contact information up there in the header. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I have over 1,000 original content articles on LinkedIn, mostly dealing with health and wellness, mostly focusing on anti-aging and longevity. But phone number, give me a call on the phone. I answer the phone pretty quickly, so that's probably the number one way. My red.olaflin@gmail.com is my Gmail address, my name, or red@redolaflin.com, both of those. But they're found on my website, redolaflin.com.
And do you want to give out that phone number?
281-687-1188. Again, 281-687-1188.
Excellent. Well, gosh, Red O'Laughlin, man, time goes fast, but thank you so much for sitting down with me, sharing some of your background and your fascinating insight.
Well, I appreciate it, Chris, a whole lot. I really and truly do. We did meet about 10 years ago. We were in a networking group together. We've been back and forth here lately and some other training issues. So anything I can do to help, more than happy. Just let me know.
Hey, you there. Yes, you. Have you ever thought about unleashing the power of AI for your business? Fresh Media Works is here to make it happen. From boosting productivity to revolutionizing customer experiences, AI holds endless possibilities. A small investment in AI, combined with our expert guidance, will begin to transform your business quickly. Ready to dive in? Give us a call now at 713-269-4620 or head over to freshmediaworks.com/AI.